off the wall, and Dad thought that a cave would be in there somewhere behind this little wall. Um, since that time, it's been dug out. If you go inside the cave today, it looks nothing like it did when we first came here because of so many people who have been digging for the Ark of the Covenant itself and or a tunnel system that would lead them to it. And all we did really is we found a bunch of pottery, some bones that were carved into tools, uh, and there was a door in here that covered a tunnel. But I only saw this door one time, along with a couple other fellows that were with me at the time. And the door was shut, locked, and bolted to the wall on each side, so there was no way to get past it. And we called my dad back in there, and he was looking for us, and he came up to the door. We were kind of down, and we came up this out of a hole, sort of, and there was this big green metal solid steel door. And we got our flashlights, shined it through the bars, and all you could see is blackness where the tunnel just kept going on and on.
Behind the door or
Behind the door, through the bars in the
the
door.
bars in the door? You can see.
Yes. And there was uh, three people at least besides my dad there, me and the two other guys. I believe it was Tom Andrews and Eric Limpkin. I'm almost positive. And anyway, my dad seemed very shocked that we found that door. He's just said, "I'm very surprised that you found this." And we didn't really know what he meant, and he didn't really want to explain himself. Um, there was another time where my dad flew over here, and evidently the people over here, the antiquities people, or somebody had sent 6 people into a tunnel system, and they believed that the men were supposedly Levites, and that they were trying to go in to where the Ark of the Covenant was. And what my dad told me is that when he got here, they said that they needed his help, and they told him that they had sent 6 men in to go into where the Ark of the Covenant was. And they asked my father if he would go in and take the bodies out of the cave because no one else would go in there. And what my dad said is that he went in there and they gave him a basket, a big basket, and he tied a rope to it, or they did, and he drug that in there, and he had to pick the bodies up and put them in this whatever cage or carrier or something that, and they had to drag their bodies out by using the rope. And that's some of the people who have died looking for the Ark of the Covenant. And that's why my dad was very secretive about it, even to people he loved and knew and trusted, because he thought that if we weren't careful, that we might end up, being one of those who were lost by pushing forth when the time wasn't right on the Ark of the Covenant.
There were some people on the digging. I wrote it on about it on, I saw it on the internet that said that they confirmed it. The Israel did it to
Yes.
us in 2005. They confirmed the story.
Yeah.
Because many people say what to believe, and it's never been in the newspaper and nothing.
Yeah.
But they confirmed it.
There was a cover story in the newspaper here that said that the men had died. They drove a Jeep into like a landmine area, and that's how they were killed. But that was just to cover up the real truth behind it all. There's been a few different people who found that out to be true. And also, there have been the same people who've dug in the Garden Tomb dug here also and drilled and did radar scans, underground radar for looking for tunnel systems. And they've dug a good ways in, and so far they haven't really found anything of a tunnel system yet. And I think, as far as I know, that's where it stands today, is nobody has found that tunnel. I was here in 2005 with the group, and we searched for the iron door that I was talking about. Uh, I don't know, at least 10 or 12 of us went in there and spread out, and we were trying to find it, and we never found the door again. We're not sure if it's covered up or if, God just closed our eyes so that we can't see it right now. My father said many times that there was no more digging that had to be done, that it was accessible. It just depended on if God wanted you in there or not.
Yes. You said kind of, if God wants to
God
get
wants
in,
you to,
it's easy.
yeah.
If you don't want, you can never get in there.
Yeah.
Try as hard as you want
And
to.
our father really wasn't the kind of guy who make up stories. And it's unbelievable in a lot of ways, but it's got to be the truth because of everything else my father did and how we were raised. And he would never lie to anyone. And I know that he was speaking the truth about the Ark of the Covenant. And I hope someday that we all get to see it for ourselves when God knows it's the right time to show it to us. Well, we're right here at the Garden Tomb in Israel. This is where we started digging with my father, Ron Wyatt. When we first came here, it was full of garbage and trash and broken glass, dead animals. And my dad kind of went to the people here and he said, hey, I would like to clean that out for you, is how we started it. And so we cleaned it out, and then we sort of kept going. And we started finding pottery, and we found some Roman glass. And my dad believed that the Ark of the Covenant was in this area. We found 4 cross holes here, 3 up above. Over here, there's some cutouts in the rock where we think they may have placed signs that said, like, where he was crucified, the King of the Jews, and the 2 thieves on either side. And then as we dug down, there was a big rock, a huge rock in the cave. And we climbed over it every day. And we started getting really sore knees and bruised up from it. And so one day I tried to move it, and it moved a little bit. And so I brushed it off. We always took turns. One guy would carry the buckets of rocks up and hand it to the guy on top. And so I was inside that time, and Dad was down further digging. And I brushed the dirt off, and there was a big plug in the rock. And you could tell it was stuck there. There was a crack all around it. We knew something was in it. And so I yelled at my dad to come up and take a look. And he did, and we pried up this rock, this plug out of the rock. And inside there was a Roman coin from Tiberius's time which is the time of Christ, and which was very, very exciting to us. That when we did that, that was our last day on the dig that time, and we were going to fly home the very next day. And so we prayed about it, what we should do. Should we just leave it there and let somebody else come in and maybe take it or whatever, or not? And so we prayed, and shortly after that, very shortly, we decided that if we could move it, that we'd flip it over exactly in its place and just put some dirt back on it and leave it there. And it stayed there until last year, sometime around September. There were other people here digging to see if they could find the Ark of the Covenant or the chamber that it's in. And somehow they hoisted it up with bobcat with a strap, and they lifted it up, and they don't know what happened to it, at least the last I heard. The other 3 cross holes on the other side of this dig, we don't know if they're still there or if they're torn up now also. We hope they're still there, because it would mean a lot to Christians everywhere to not have those destroyed, because it seemed just like how it's described in the Bible, with a thief on each side, or a murderer and a thief, and Jesus in the middle. And
we're pretty much convinced this is the place where Christ was crucified, and that's why we started digging. And my father did the dig to. The only reason he did the dig is to prove that the Bible is accurate, so Christians can, have a good foundation belief in that the Bible's true. And that's why my father's digging. He wasn't doing anything for money. He was doing it to get the truth out.
The whole reason my dad got into archaeology at all was because he didn't like people how they would do away with the miracles, like the Red Sea crossing site and Noah's Ark and things. They say that the Red Sea crossing happened in the Sea of Reeds, which gets ankle deep sometimes, and that a flash flood killed all these people, the whole Egyptian army. And it was ridiculous to my father, and it made him angry that people would make up things like this with no evidence whatsoever. It's just guessing with seemingly no motive to think that. We dug many years here.
When you dig here, you dig the big hole, but when you found the cross hole, you have to crawl under, because the hole was not that big as we can see here today. So you have to crawl under the earth.
Yes, we went down, straight down here where this little dip is in the rock, and there was a handle carved out of the rock where you could put your hand in, or a rope, and grab it. And so we went straight down, and we started coming over this way towards the chapel a little bit. And then we decided no, because it was all loose stuff, and it wasn't, it seemed like we found more like broken pottery and trash this way, but we went along over that way because of the 3 cross holes that we found.
So you were crawling
under the earth, yes. And yeah, we didn't have it tall enough to stand. We had to crawl, and it was very dirty, and the hole filled up with flies and mosquitoes, and it was very hard work.
But then you did something strange. You just broke into the mountain.
Yes, we went along under the ground right beside this mountain here. And we didn't know exactly which direction to go. And we saw some roots coming out of the actual side of the mountain, which seemed very strange to us, because there would have to have been some chamber behind in there. for a root to be coming out. And so we started prying on this crack, and then a big hunk of rock fell out of the wall, like somebody had almost stuck it there.
Yeah.
And inside that, you found the Tiberius coin.
Yeah, inside there. Which that was the second one we
This-
found.
The second one.
Yeah.
But actually, you found that first, didn't you?
Oh,
Before-
that's right. Yeah, that's right. Because the fourth cross hole we found was down deep in the hole.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so anyway, he found one Tiberius coin inside the mountain. The other Tiberius coin was, like I said, in the plug in the rock to date it, because that's how they dated
You
things.
didn't remove it.
We didn't. No.
We left it there. We did things carefully, and made it neat and everything. And when we come back this year, we just look down in the hole, and it's nothing like it used to be. Like my brother said, they got a bobcat in here, and kind of, well, they tore up.
They just dozed up all the dirt.
So
Yeah.
it's destroyed for what you. have
We
sown.
think they pulled the one cross hole up, and it
We
got thrown
we
away.
know they pulled it up, and
You saw it. You were here the first year.
yes.
It started here.
Yeah, it was like September 2005,
Yeah.
I believe. I was here digging with two archaeological groups that had to join together to do the dig because of the Israeli Antiquities Department. They just got tired of both of them arguing about it and said, "You get together and do it." And so we had two groups here, and we never even tried to dig for the three cross holes, which we had covered up with our fill dirt from our tunnel. We covered those up.
Why not?
Huh?
Why not?
Yeah,
You
because
don't have to answer.
we wanted to cover them up because of the significance of them,
Yeah.
and to save them and preserve them.
Mm.
And we thought that if we left them out, that people would, whatever, maybe destroy them. People that weren't real good Christians might not want the proof that Christ was here. And the one in the center, the cross holes on the other side, had a crack all coming down from the whole side of the mountain where the earthquake happened when Christ died. It made a crack, and it went all the way down.
You saw the crack.
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah, it was-
And my father scraped a sample of what looked like really black, dark in the crack.
Yeah.
And so Dad scraped it up and put it in a little black film container. And later on, people were thinking that the cross hole was down in the hole that had the crack in it. But that was pretty much their misconception about what Dad had said. And Dad didn't trust a lot of people with this because of its importance to everyone. And but anyway, we believe that that was a sample of Christ's blood, that when the soldiers stuck him in the side, that they hit his spleen, and that the water and the blood fell down through the crack and onto the mercy seat of the Ark of the Covenant, therefore fulfilling our salvation in his sacrifice. And
Did you crawl around in the mountain, or was that just your dad afterwards?
we dug into the mountain and cleared out a bunch of loose rock, and then we hit solid smoked quartz.
Mhm.
And it was very, very hard digging. And after we started the dig, I ended up getting married, and for 4 years, so I didn't come over, and my brother and a couple friends came over and helped dig. Brian did a little, didn't he?
Yeah, we dug.
Brian Karras. And
We set up 3 crosses and put up some signs just to give people an idea what it would look like.
And at that time, we believed that it was probably a very visible spot from the wall of the city, the old city of Jerusalem. And last year, I guess September 2006 is when they came back with the bobcat and dozed up. And taking a look in the hole there, they've made a mess of it, really, in my opinion. And it looks like they're going to be covering it up soon because they built framework in there to, looks like, to seal it back up, but it doesn't look like they're going to fill it with rock or dirt or anything. It looks like they're just going to cover it. So hopefully some other time, maybe somebody can come back and try to find the 3 cross holes that we originally found before we started the dig.
Do you think there will be anything to find left there now? Do you recognize anything when you have a look down there?
Yes, I recognize the hole we broke out of the side of the rock, the side of the mountain. And you can see part of the tunnel, our original tunnel going in where it came in. And well, here you can see what they've done on their dig. The original hole that we went into the side of the mountain is the top hole here, if you can see that. And then we went downward through a lot of smoke quartz inside that hole. Yes. Okay. And at first there's a lot of loose rock, but then we really had to start using jackhammers and chisels, and it was very, very hard work going down because of how hard the quartz is. And even the drill bits, some of the best drill bits that you can buy couldn't penetrate the quartz, at least not at a very fast rate, and it always ruined the bits on the dig I was on in 2005. They've dug way out further than we ever were. We never dug this far out.
We stayed alongside the wall.
And we're not exactly sure why. Maybe they were trying to, they found a cistern down in here, an ancient cistern and some things, but as of yet, they haven't found the chamber where the Ark of the Covenant rests. My dad said that when he saw the Ark of the Covenant, that the whole back of the room was glowing and sparkling. And what Dad said was that that was the smoke quartz, and the reflection of the gold off of it was, with a light, was just very beautiful. So they carved this out of solid quartz and to make a very beautiful resting place for the Ark of the Covenant. And
but he never told you exactly where it was.
He never told us exactly where it was because he was afraid, because some people, it is said that there's been a few people who have actually died looking for it, and Dad thought that it would be very dangerous, and he warned his wife at the time, and
he told us when he was real sick, before he couldn't make it back over here, and he told us that he was worried about people's safety is what it was. He didn't want somebody coming in there for the wrong reason and ended up,
because something this important, God knows when he wants it to be shown to the world, and we don't. And Dad didn't want people to try to force it on God to show it now when the timing has to be perfect to save as many souls as possible, because that's what God is all about. And when the 10 Commandments do come out and are shown to the world, I think that a lot of people are going to be ready and to need to know the truth about the Bible and the 10 Commandments and how they were written on the tables of stone. My dad said that it actually looked like a finger in soft butter was how it was written. And so it's going to be very awesome when those are brought forth to see the finger that that wrote that, you know.
You talk about the cutouts. Is this what we see? Some of them over there.
Yes.
It looks like they have cut in the.
Yes,
the
there's
wall.
one here. It's
Yeah.
kind of flat there, and then there's one down lower
Yeah.
right there behind
Because I've
those
never
two
seen
beams.
that before because it was under the ground before.
Yeah, parts of it, because our fill dirt
Yeah.
raised up the level of
Yeah.
it. And I believe possibly they were looking for the 3 cross holes by digging so far over. I hope that those weren't destroyed as well or lost
But some of
in
it
their
is
effort.
gone. After your opinion, some
Yes.
of the cross holes are gone here.
At least I know
Just that
one.
One here
The one that had the plug and the Tiberius coin
is gone.
is gone. And the last I heard, they didn't know where it is, if they've located it. The archaeological people who came here, if they did recover it again, they haven't mentioned it to us. I hope they do find it.
But
And
you recognize the stone?
oh yeah,
And you can't see it.
and no, it's not here. And the pictures he showed me of his dig when they got back after September 2006, 2006, he come to my house. One of the fellows who was digging here wanted to show me the pictures of the dig and to ask my opinion on some things, some film that was taken of my dad years ago and what he was doing. And in one of the pictures, the cross hole was still there in the tunnel where we had left it. And in 2005, when I was here, it was still there. People were sitting on it when they took a break. The workers, every time when they got tired, they would just go sit on it.
You
And
saw that?
yes,
You didn't say anything?
I didn't say anything because
Hmm.
I felt like that if God wanted them to find it, that he would show it to them. And why would I show them when he could have easily showed it to them if that was his will? All I did is I prayed for God's will on that dig, and sincerely and honestly prayed for his will to happen. And if it was his will for them to find it, that they find it. But obviously it wasn't his will at the time. And it's hard to know what God's reasons and purposes are for us because we're just human. And he's our Savior and was here from the beginning. And
He knows the right time that it needs to come out. So.
But I don't think that the people digging here took very much care in what they were doing. It just looks like a mess down there to me. And hopefully someday in the future, someone will be able to go and retrieve the 10 Commandments out of the chamber. And when they do, my dad left some things in there just to show what he said was true, that he was in there with it and that he saw the Ark of the Covenant. And so he left a piece of a pomegranate and some actual videotapes. So, I mean, I'm sure they're probably ruined by now from the moisture, but
Somebody gets back in there.
at some point,
In the beginning, God created the earth in only 6 days. And on the 4th day, he set the sun, the moon, and the stars in their order, and he said, "Let them serve as signs to mark sacred times and days and years." Now this shows us that God's times were already set from creation. On the 7th day, he created another time cycle, the cycle of the 7 weekdays, with the 7th day being sanctified and made holy. And this shows us that Sabbath was part of creation week. Now, Jesus, who according to John was the Word of God, he created the earth, and he said,
For verily I say unto you, till heaven and earth pass, one jot or one tittle shall in no wise pass from the law till all be fulfilled. Whosoever therefore shall break one of these least commandments, and shall teach men so, he shall be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whosoever shall do and teach them, the same shall be called great in the kingdom of heaven.
Now, what the Creator basically told us is that these things will perish before what they were meant to do pass away. Now, during creation, he didn't say, "I will send you men, leaders, and spiritual leaders, and they will serve as signs to mark sacred times and days and years." Unless someone would claim to be the sun or the moon, of course, which many rulers actually did. Nor did he allow anyone to change his weekly Sabbath. Men had no business changing God's times. Now this is why, when God speaks about an enemy earthly ruler called the Antichrist, he says,
And he shall speak great words against the Most High, and shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and think to change times and laws. And they shall be given into his hand until a time and times, and the dividing of time. But the judgment shall sit, and they shall take away his dominion, to consume and to destroy it unto the end.
now the crime of this hostile power is so great that God himself will deal with it when he returns. Which means that this power is still here when Jesus returns the second time. And therefore it has existed for a very long time. And this also shows us the great crime of taking such a position as to overthrow the order that the Creator put in place during creation week. Do you remember what the Bible says about Babel in the book of Genesis? The people got together to build a great tower that would function as the world center of authority. God himself confused the languages by a miracle at this tower to prevent a one world order. And this tower was then known as the Tower of Babel. And Babel means confusion. Taking a closer look at all ancient languages,
And also many modern languages derived from the ancient ones, we see Saturday bearing the name of the Sabbath. Many of the languages name all the other days with numbers like first, second day, etc. And then Saturday is named with names plainly reflecting the word Sabbath.
it seems like God wanted this order to be continued, no matter what language or culture, as it was a universal sign of the creation and also the identification mark of the Creator.
And so it was only natural for God, who created these languages, to place his seal of authority there. It was not just in the Hebrew language, but all over the world.
Many have tried to destroy the weekly order of 7 days that God established, where the seventh day is a holy day of rest and communion with the Creator. It has been done in many different and creative ways.
Babylon, in its time, tried to change the weekly order by creating a month that started at every new moon, and then they celebrated every seventh day following that particular day. The final week was 8 or 9 days, breaking the continuous 7-day cycle before restarting at new moon again.
If Babylon had won the world over at this point, nobody would have known when the correct seventh day was. However, the Jews upheld the witness of God's times and was later confirmed by Yeshua or Jesus. And from then on, they continued to bear witness of the true Sabbath day unto this day.
Both Egypt and France have experimented with a weekly cycle of 10 days. The Soviet Union experimented with a 5-day weekly cycle for a while. The fact of the matter is this: for as long as God has had opposition, the rebels have tried to fix God's week to what they claim is better.
The act in itself is a complete rejection of the Creator and the creation. The following changes to God's times have been made and are now used all over the world. And coincidentally, it is basically all of God's times that have been changed.
While the days that we know today start at midnight and continue 24 hours to the following midnight, God's days start at sunset and last till the next sunset. The time for sunset, as everyone knows, is determined by the Earth's angle to the sun that was created on the fourth day of creation. As the Earth spins around its own axis, the sun moves across our sky and disappears behind the horizon at evening, which then becomes the marker that we all know as sunset. This was one of the signs God created for his times. God's year starts at springtime. The months that contain God's special days are the 1st, the 3rd, and the 7th, spring and fall. This has great symbolic value for God, who made it that way. The man-made calendar starts with January, named in honor of the Roman god Janus. It's centered around the sun being born and reborn. God said the new moon would determine the first month and thereby his feast, called Passover. A majority in the world, atheists and religious people alike, celebrate a date established by religious leader, and not God's time. The same is the case with God's feasts in the 3rd month. Also, God's feasts that are tied to his second coming and the judgment in the 7th month have been abolished by almost everyone except the Jews and a minority of Christians who still respect God's times. And instead, the world has added several feasts of their own making, like Christmas and New Year's at the end of December, Midsummer, and other such feast days.
In the 4th commandment in the Decalogue, we find the Sabbath. Now, today, 2 different days of the week is referred to as the Sabbath, but only one of them is the true biblical Sabbath. All the ancient languages referring to the Sabbath is referring to the same day, including Moses, Israel, and Jesus, who used this term when referring to sunset on Friday until sunset on Saturday. But Rome would follow in Babylon's footsteps in confusing God's times. The old Roman calendar of Roman Emperor Julian was later modified by Pope Gregory. And this calendar system is used all over the world today, known as the Gregorian calendar. As the rest of the Julian calendar was ordered according to the sun and the Roman gods, so was the weekly sacredness of Sunday. God's original Sabbath, on the other hand, was first turned into a fasting day and then later turned into a working day by those who claimed to worship him. When paganism and Christianity was mixed together as the Roman emperors converted to Christianity, Christians started keeping Sunday as Sabbath instead of the original one.
From the persecution of the Christians started until Emperor Constantine Christianized the Roman state, the church had been in a continuous falling away state. The partly converted pagans had slowly pushed the Christian faith in a new direction. When the Roman emperor converted to Christianity, the ideal was to mix the Roman religion with Christianity and create a unified religion to unify the people. The emperor himself venerated both Christ and the sun god until they became one and the same. Constantine was the first to make a state law that effectively made Sunday the day of rest in direct opposition to God's command. On the venerable day of the sun, let the magistrates and the people residing in the cities rest, and let all workshops be closed. In the country, however, persons engaged in agriculture may freely and lawfully continue their pursuits, because it often happens that another day is not so suitable for grain sowing or for wine planting, lest by neglecting the proper moment for such operations the bounty of heaven should be lost. Chambers' Encyclopedia says this: unquestionably, the first law, either ecclesiastical or civil, by which the sabbatical observance of that day is known to have been ordained, is the Edict of Constantine in 321 AD. Sunday was meant to blend the two religions together, and thereby also the divided people, but many Christians resisted this. The resistance became a great annoyance, and the Sabbath keepers was viewed as opponents to the peace and prosperity. A lot of the Christians refused to turn from the biblical Sabbath and to a day associated with pagan worship and didn't believe God had changed it. This angered the leaders and priests, as they felt their authority as lawmakers for the church was being questioned. In the church meeting in Laodicea that took place sometime between AD 363 to 366, they decided that those Christians who continued as they always had done and kept Sabbath on the biblical seventh day were to be viewed as heretics and separated from the established church. Their legislation said, Christians must not Judaize by resting on the Sabbath, but must work on that day, rather honoring the Lord's day, and if they can, rest then as Christians. But if any shall be found to be Judaizers, let them be anathema from Christ. From Canon 29. Not only were they not allowed to keep that day that God had ordained in the Ten Commandments holy, but they were ordered to work on that day as well, in direct transgression to the command that had been given in the law, saying that they were not to work on that day. Canon 6 at the meeting said that heretics were not to enter the house of God. Canon 10 said that they were not to allow their children to marry heretics, and they were not even allowed to join in prayer with heretics. Turning Sabbath-keeping Christians to outcasts from society, in addition to increase people's superstitions and fears, in the end, the result was that they were very poorly treated. Canon 37 said it was not allowed to feast together with Jews or to partake in anything tied to the feasts of the Jews. It also said that it was not allowed to partake in the biblical Passover. Those Christians who were martyred for their faith was not to be considered martyrs according to Canon 34, meaning if they were killed, they were not to be viewed as heroes in the same way that martyrs from the established church was honored. Many Christians today
unaware of the history of Sunday, think they keep this day because Jesus rose on that day. However, God had already incorporated Christ's resurrection day in his own times in his law. Jesus rose on God's feast day that was called the Feast of First Fruits, also known as the Day of the Wave Sheaf. In addition to the Feast of First Fruits, the Lord's Supper and baptism was to be a memorial of Christ's death and resurrection, all instituted by God to commemorate this particular day. There was no need to destroy God's Sabbath in order to create a new memorial. But Christian leaders abolished the Feast of First Fruits, and then they changed the